why don't you sort of sketch out the backlog problem?
Sure. So it just looking at just as you said, one aspect of immigration policy, and that is legal immigration. And so there are other agencies that deal with border security, and the State Department deals with visitor visas and things like that. So this is just specifically looking at U.S. Customs and Immigration Service, USCIS's caseload. So the number of applications for immigration benefits pending before this particular agency. And this is essentially the gatekeeper for legal immigration. And it is the agency to which people apply for. There's over 50 different forms that you have to fill out depending on what kind of immigration benefit you're looking at. Now, these benefits can run the gamut from replacing a lost card to being granted asylum, to granted citizenship, granted legal permanent residence, or your green card. It runs the gamut. And at any given time, there's millions of, or in any given year, there's millions of on the order of like roughly 7 million applications filed, and the agency turns over roughly approves about 90% of these applications in any given year. Only about 10% are denied for one reason or another, and that's sort of the agency average across all forms, and so it varies. And so their caseload in general, when things are going great, is tremendous, and they turn over a substantial share of them. This is an agency that is performing. However, the USCIS is a somewhat unique agency in that it's a federal agency that is very much public facing, and that public facing activity often must be done in person. And so immigration benefits, there's biometrics involved, there's interviews that have to be given and granted. And so unlike even the IRS, for the most
Background
part,
checks.
you mail stuff to them. And that's, of all the federal agencies that individuals interact with, it's probably the IRS that people probably most deal with most directly, and yet you do that somewhat by correspondence, whereas USCIS very much involves in-person activity. And given the volume, it is labor intensive. There's a lot of people who need to do a lot of things, essentially, for them to do their mission. And because of that mission, it was somewhat susceptible to disruption because of COVID-19. And so just a little bit of a decline in the agency's performance, given the scope and scale of their workload, can have tremendous consequences. So if just a little bit goes wrong, just a small percentage can mean an awful lot in absolute terms when you consider how many applications they're being asked to process. And that's essentially what happened to this agency. Essentially, the agency publishes data on their application statistics, including what is called their pending caseload. So basically, how many applications are at any given time just hanging out at the agency waiting to be processed. And this has actually been conflated somewhat with this notion of a backlog, and we'll get into that in a second. Of that roughly 8.5 million applications that were pending with the agency, over 5 million are considered backlogged, which is to say that for the given form, it has taken longer than the agency's process, sort of mandated processing times. It has exceeded that amount. And the backlog is about 5.2 million as of the last indication. And that part has grown substantially in the last 2 years because of the disruption to the agency.